Now, last week, the foundations of 3 presidents and 1 deputy president joined forces and took part in the national dialogue to address the crisis in the country. Among the foundations that were part of this dialogue to discuss the deep and pervasive national general crisis were former presidents FW de Klerk, Thabo Mbeki, Kgalema Motlanthe, and former deputy president Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka. De Klerk, Mbeki, Motlanthe and Mlambo-Ngcuka addressed the national dialogue by discussing the provision of a safe, non-partisan platform to South Africans of all races to confront in all spheres of the country. Well, joining us this morning from our Cape Town studio is Mbulelo Bikwani from the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation to tell us what came out of the dialogue and what the way forward is. It's great to have you on the program. Thanks so much for being our guest here, Mbulelo.
Thank you very much, Leah.
We have seen so many dialogues taking place. It's absolutely unbelievable. I don't think South Africa has ever seen so many memorial lectures and organized dialogues taking place as we have since the beginning of this year. What would you say made this one stand out? Obviously, the caliber of speakers was amazing, but the effect of having deputy presidents and former presidents being present?
I mean, that's the one thing that makes it unique, is the fact that we have 3 heads of states and a deputy president participating as speakers in the dialogue. That's the one thing. The other one, it's not only their foundations that are involved, but there's much more than those. For instance, the Sobukwe, Robert Sobukwe Trust, Albert Luthuli, Jake Gerwel, Helen Suzman, and so there's quite a number of foundations that were involved in this, and that makes it unique, because if you think about it, there is no structure outside of political parties that accommodates South Africans as they are, rather than as being involved in party politics.
Yeah. Do you think this is a way of getting the message over to politicians? Because we've seen so many, as I mentioned at the beginning of this interview, dialogues, people suddenly speaking out, people emphasizing the need for good leadership. Is this the way that people are expressing their opinions and trying to get a message through to the current leadership?
Leanne, when a country is in a crisis like we are, I mean, we are in a crisis, whether we like it or not. If you open the newspapers, children are being killed. You open the newspapers, there's racial intolerance. You open the newspapers, there's just everything. It's the government and the courts. Now, that can't be a normal democracy. So people are speaking in many other forms. They march, they do this. But we are saying as foundations, we must make sure that through our correcting of what is wrong, we don't create new problems for the future. Hence, we're trying to bring the dialogue part as one way of making sure that as we solve the problems, but we are also bearing in mind that we have a future to live in the country. We still have to live together. We still have to support each other as a country. So that's why this one is really unlike the other dialogues that you have seen before.
Yeah. You know, a lot of people, and we actually posed this question to the former South African President Thabo Mbeki on our show on Friday, is a fear that getting former presidents and leaders like this to come up and express their views is almost like leading from the grave and trying to put their leadership styles on the current leaders. Can we look at it this way, or can we say, you know, they're out of it and they're giving their experience and trying to talk to the leadership now and say, guys, you're losing the plot a little bit. Let's pull straight and carry on. I mean, the argument for leading from the grave, how does that make you feel?
That's exactly how many contributions, valuable and invaluable contributions, have been stopped from being offered. Is this term of leading from the grave? Now, that's a term of people who actually don't want to hear other views. If we're serious about this country, every view is important, even from those who are in the grave. We are in a crisis. In a crisis, you don't choose who must speak. Everyone must really contribute a possible solution, an idea on how we are going to resolve the issues in the country. So it really doesn't bother us, the fact that the former presidents, but if the country was going fine and moving in the right direction, I can tell you now they would be in retirement and doing other things, but they can't do other things when the country is not going the right direction.
Yeah. Just as we begin to close, this dialogue that was held last week, how effective was it? What's the response been? And finally, will there be more? I mean, can we expect this to be something that we can hear and see on a regular basis?
The dialogue was very successful from our perspective as foundations. Strictly speaking, people started to identify the key challenges that the country has, and a number of other issues that might not even be on the political platform and talked about. For instance, some of the groups that I also chaired were talking about family values in the country, that we need to go back to some real family values if we want a country that has values itself. So what is now going to happen moving forward? The dialogues are going to be regionalized, and the issues that were really that came out of the national dialogue would then be fed into the regional dialogues for generation of possible solutions, and they will even be localized, because the idea about these dialogues is that the person on the street, we're trying to make sure that the already voiceless people don't go without a voice. And we are making sure that the person on the street, the ordinary South African, will have an opportunity of making a contribution through these dialogues led by the foundations.
Yeah, fantastic. We have to unfortunately leave it there, but we'll be following and hopefully engaging with you a lot more ahead of the next dialogue. But thank you so much for talking to us here on the program. That was Mbulelo Bikwani, the CEO of the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation, talking to us about these national dialogues that were taking place last week, the big one with the former presidents, and of course others that will be coming up soon. Let's take a break. Africa Month under the spotlight after this. Stay tuned.